Welcome back to Old Guy REI. This week, Mikey and I are doing the Zoom highlights for our meeting that was on January 22nd of 2025. It was a really informative meeting. I think, Mikey, we started off the night talking about HELOC, and I started there just sharing what we're going through with this product from Figure. And I think we might have mentioned in previous videos that it's basically an automated process. We have one of the lenders that you and I have worked with, Brian, over at Neighborhood Loans. They actually start the application for you and put in some information. And once that's done, there's a portal that we submit all of our income and taxes and different things like that. It's been a challenge for us, so I'm looking forward. I talked to Brian, and he's willing to come on with me and share exactly what we're going through. And I know the process might be different from person to person, but right now they were only accepting my wife because she has W-2 income, and that wasn't enough to qualify us for the HELOC. So she ended up having to start taking draws from one of her retirement accounts to add to her income and raise it to qualify for the process. And I think we mentioned before that this is blockchain based. So it seems like it's just like a big pool of investors that are lending out kind of private money, not really hard money. I don't think the rates are that crazy. If and when we do get this thing approved, we'll be paying 10%. It'll be a $50,000 line. And it's kind of weird because they give you the money all up front. You need to take it up front, and then you can pay it back right away if you don't need it all for some reason. But the cost on it was better than some of the other products that we had seen. Some of other lenders were talking about DSCR HELOCs and things like that. And the interest rate was close, but the cost to do it was outrageous. I thought, $9,000 or $10,000 when this Figure process is going to be about 2,400. So a lot of the investors on the call that night were interested because they're thinking about doing them too. And I was wondering if have you had any experience with doing the HELOC yet?
It's just from what you were researching, and this is exhaustive research, not financial advice. This is just something you're going through. And there was great questions like talking about locking versus adjusting and the rate at that time they're talking about and the fees involved. And this would be you also looked at investment between primary too. So you're doing tons of research on this.
Yeah, one thing I was talking to Dion about, and a spot that I don't want to be in again is because the guys have always told us money's easy to get when you don't need it, right? But when you do need it, it's been tough. So I have been kind of reaching out and trying to find different information. And so although, Cynthia is not wanting really to put any other debt on our primary, I thought it would still be a good idea if we can get a HELOC, excuse me, a HELOC on our primary just in case, and to get it while you can, right? Because, for example, we don't really need it right now, so it's probably easier to get, but it would just be there for backup in case some emergency happened or something. Um, and a few of the people on the call were kind of thinking the same thing. Uh, Somebody on another call recently was talking about also if you do have a HELOC on an investment property or your primary, eh, even if you don't want to use it, you should use it occasionally for small things maybe and pay it right back just to keep it active. Because if the banks start closing down those lines, they're less likely to close any down that have activity on them. If it's just been sitting there for a couple of years, they might close it down right away because of inactivity. And there's such a wide range of options out there, for for this one through Figure. It's amortized over 30 years. It had a 5-year draw period. It was fixed interest. And like I said, it was like 10.1, I think was the last quote we got. And if you don't need all the money, you can put it back. I think you have to wait a month or two before you could put the money back in. But then you're only paying interest on what you leave out. And so I thought, and it was going to cost about 2,400 to get that done. It was a line of 49,000. And then when I looked at credit unions in St. Louis because that's you had recommended that. I called 6 or 7. None of them did HELOCs on investment properties. One of our other friends, Mark, who's been on the channel with us a couple of times, his company does do them, but it was a DSCR HELOC, and the rates were similar. It was about 10%, but the cost to do the loan was quite high. And I think it was around $9,000, they said. So I didn't want to me, that's a waste of money. Spending that much just to get, you know, a HELOC it's really expensive. The one on our primary, the interest rates right now are a little bit better. They're around 8%. And that was a 15 or a 20-year product. It was adjustable rate. And the fees weren't going to be too bad. We didn't really get into that too much, but it was probably closer to the $2,000 or $3,000 mark. But on those, like I said, it's adjustable when you begin it. And this credit union they'll let you take 3 draws and you can, well, I should say 3 draws that you can fix the interest rate on. So that was kind of a nice feature. The interest rate's a little bit higher when you do that, but at least it's locked in for the life of the loan. And that had a 10-year draw period. You could do interest only on that one. And if you do, then once the 10-year draw period closes, then you start paying down the principal. You would have a principal and interest payment for the remainder of the loan. So a lot of information out there. Hopefully we'll get this one closed and we'll be able to share with everybody what we went through. And like I said, for us, it's been really difficult, but maybe for somebody that has a little bit higher W-2 income, it wouldn't be such a big deal.
I would figure it sounds like you can make a lot of adjustments because you could decide if you wanted to lock the rate or have an adjustable. Is that right?
That option was from the credit union.
Okay.
The one going through Figure is fixed from the start. So I thought that was really nice. You don't have to, play around with any adjustable interest rates. And so that was a pretty good discussion. It went on for quite some time. I think it took up most of the meeting this week. But after that, there was a couple new people that joined in. There was another contractor actually that jumped on the call with us. That was great. And he's been into it almost as long as I have. So it was nice to have somebody to chat with about that crazy business. But he's not necessarily looking at buy and hold. He was looking to do short-term rentals, and he doesn't have his first one yet, but that's what he's looking for.
And he had also mentioned glamping. He was like looking into that, but the cost, I guess, just to look into that product, there would be such a large fee. And after that, you wouldn't even know if you would get approval. So I think that was concerning for him.
Yeah, that's interesting because I guess one of the bigger investors there is Heather, right? Heather Blankenship, I think is her name. But she got started in RV parks and things like that. It's turned into the glamping style, but she's done amazing. If you ever get to see any of her stories, she talks about the first one she got, and she was actually sleeping on the floor in the office at the first place that she got, and now she does seminars and retreats, and I think it's mostly geared for female investors, which is awesome, but she still puts out a lot of great content.
Sorry to go back to the HELOC thing, but
Mhm.
I know some people are asking about DTI. How did that turn out?
Yeah, so we're trying to get the HELOC on one of our properties that we paid off. We have two that we paid it for cash, but even though they're paid in cash, our debt to income ratio was a little bit high, so the lender suggested trying to do one first, and then and then also for us, right now, three of our units are vacant, so there's no income, and that hurt our DTI a bit too. But again, once we get through this and once we get those units filled, I think we'll probably pursue getting the HELOC on our primary next, just to have it. Like I said, you don't need it now, but you might need it, in 6 months or a year. And then if you try to do it at that time, your debt to income ratio might have changed or something crazy. Maybe you lost your job or things like that. I'm self-employed, so my flow of work might slow down or something like that. And Brian with Neighborhood Loans did mention that they're changing the process a little bit to where they're allowing a spouse's income that's self-employed. So that's going to help us in the future too.
And we talk about portfolio management, and this is something I'm trying to understand because while you're waiting for the next purchase, there's still work that can be done in between. And that's what you're doing now. You're looking at the HELOC products, you're looking at how can I change or adjust things. And even with your one property, you were able to raise the rents. And now we're looking at cash on cash even getting better just by holding over the years. All these little things that can add value.
Yeah, that's been really nice. I think just a small rent increase can really change your numbers a bit. So that was great to see. I think, we mentioned this crazy tenant we have that we're going to have to evict now because she pulled a gun on our property manager. But and we certainly don't need another turnover right now because we've got the three vacant units. But I think that kind of behavior is unacceptable and dangerous. Like I told you on a call recently, that we count on this property manager to help us protect our investment. And if they can't do that, if they're afraid for their lives or anything like that, we just can't let that happen. So, but I think overall it's going to be a benefit because even though she's a Section 8 tenant, the rent was way below what we could be getting for the unit. And from pictures that we got, the unit itself doesn't look too bad. It's just that all of the belongings of the tenant are kind of all over the place and messy. Um, that might not be too big of an issue, but the fact that she pulled a gun is the big issue. So we're going to get her out of there, hopefully get higher rents, and then that'll help our portfolio overall. So I'm looking forward to it, but a little bit nervous too.
And we also talked about the weather and frozen pipes. And there was an investor you were kind of helping, talking about insulation in the attic. I thought that was great, all that advice that you had given.
Yeah, they had some frozen pipes and the pipes were in the attic. So they had the repairs done and we're wondering if it would be better to pay someone to wrap all the pipes in the attic or just get the attic insulated, maybe with blown in insulation. And I thought it would be a little bit less expensive to have it blown in versus someone, needing to be up there crawling around, wrapping each pipe with insulation. And after we spoke again later, he agreed and he had gotten a good price. And so he's going to move forward in doing that. And not just to keep the pipes from freezing, but also to make the house a little bit more insulated for the tenants and maybe help with energy costs and things like that. So he's going to be doing that soon, I think.
And we love how Matt talks about optimizing your unit. And if you can lower the utility bills for the tenant, they'll likely stay longer. And I also liked how you talked about putting baffles. That was
Mhm.
something I haven't heard before. And that was good information to screen for moisture and stuff that doesn't build up.
Yeah, the baffles are usually put in place where you have um, they're called eave vents, and they're just the little screens you'll see, right under the roof line on the side of a building. They're little screens. So if they blow in insulation, you don't want to plug those up. So they'll put plastic, they call them baffles, but it's just like a plastic pan, and they nail or staple those in place. That way, when they blow the insulation in, it doesn't get to the vent, and there's still a channel of air to be able to let air in and out and to help keep moisture from building up and things like that. So, and they're not very expensive. Home Depot sells them. They're like probably a couple dollars each, but um, so we were thinking blown in insulation would be a better option for this house. And yeah, like you said, if the tenants are more comfortable and you can maybe just seeing that you care and that you think about their bills too, they might stay longer. We had recently one of our tenants had reached out because they're in Missouri and they've had a brutal winter and they hadn't really experienced a winter yet in their apartment or in the 2 bedroom that they have. So they reached out to figure out why their heating costs were so much over the last month, but they were obviously using the heater a lot more because it snowed and things like that. So, but and so I was kind of wondering, their lease is due up in the end of February, and we had issues in that house. We did a lot of remodeling, but there was one plumbing leak that affected their unit. So we actually had to put them in a hotel for a couple of nights while that work was being done. So I was kind of thinking they were going to move, but we just found out they want to stay and renew their lease. So we actually, Cynthia and I talked, and we were thinking that we wouldn't do a rent increase this time because of what they went through, and they still want to stay. So I think our property manager says they're a really great couple of people in there, and they're keeping the place really nice, and that's important. So with all of that said, the guys tell us that we should try to do increases to keep up with maintenance costs and insurance costs and things like that. Um, we haven't had any insurance increases yet. Maybe if that happens in the next year, then next year when the leases come around again, we'll need to bump rents a little bit, but at least they'll have a whole year, hopefully without any big incidents. So we were glad they wanted to stay.
Yeah, Zuber was talking about that with Steadily, and
Mhm.
they're saying California and Florida, they wouldn't recommend shopping because even that act they can cancel your policy that you have in place. But he was surprised saying the other 48 states, they're seeing deflating prices for quotes. So they said that actually might be a good chance to shop around and see if you can get a beatable quote.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you and I talked about before, because on a couple of ours, and I know you did it with one of yours, I think, where we're just basically insuring for the actual cash value, and that brought our rates down by a lot. Um, but when Zuber was talking about maybe you don't get a better rate, but you can get better coverage for the same price. So, and before you and I talked about maybe keeping the actual cash value policies for a year or two, and after you did a rent increase or two, then just reinstate the full replacement value policy. And so I think that's a great point. I think, if we do shop around in the Midwest where our properties are, we might be able to reinstate the full replacement policy for close to what we're paying on the cash value policy. And then we would switch for sure, have that better protection.
Yeah, I liked how we talked about auditing all of his policies and saying, oh, okay, this one is way low. I gotta adjust this. And
Mhm.
I haven't done that before, so I can't imagine doing Zuber's, all of his
Yeah.
policies, having it on that. I don't know how he does that. So I'd like to learn more.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know, I guess doing this research is going to help both of us because, for example, if you buy something for 100,000 this year and you insure it, so we would insure it for 100,000 plus 20%. And our thoughts are if something catastrophic happened, we would just clear the lot. That extra 20% would be enough to clear the lot, and then we would sell the lot or something. But if the property is worth, 110 or 120 next year, I don't think the insurance company is going to adjust that for you. You're going to have to go back in and recalculate your numbers with them and increase, your coverage. And that's true with cash value or full replacement, because if you're insuring for a 120 this year and then next year things go up and 120 might not cover everything. So you'll have to be aware of that. So um, I guess it's part of stabilization, ongoing stabilization, I guess.
And never ending. There's evolving ways of optimization and stabilization.
Yeah. And it's, I was thinking the other day about how we don't usually learn something until it affects us, so it could be something like, well, take the insurance thing, for example. We, when we buy a place or when we've bought a place in the past, we know we just need insurance. So we just go and get insurance. And whatever the cost is, that's what we pay. But now that we have a little bit of time, because we're not, say, growing really fast right now, you have time to dig into all these things and try to get better pricing and figure out how things actually work. So you'll be better prepared if you ever need to use it, or um, a situation comes up like that. So just keep learning and figuring stuff out. There's a lot to learn. These guys that we follow are still learning, and they've been doing it for 20-25 years. So it's a long road, but it's worth it.
And with travelers, I thought for the smaller purchase prices, 5,000 was the max deductible you could do. And I would check with a bunch of other people, and they said we couldn't even get to 5,000. We could only do 2,500 deductible. But finally, State Farm, I found an agent that said, no, we can do 10,000 deductible on the smaller purchases. So that's actually helping me with my quotes.
Okay. Did you go for that policy? Is that the one where you were facing us like $730 or something, and you found one for less with that higher deductible?
Yeah, I was able to get that more towards what I'm seeing on average for single families is around that 500 range. So I was
Okay.
able to get that and I've stuck with that. And we haven't heard anything back in terms of a risk assessor. So I'm just kind of waiting to hear. That's the last thing, but yeah, nothing yet so far.
Yeah, that's another thing that we learned too, right? You were going through that, you got an insurance policy, and then the insurance company actually went to the property and you didn't get notified, but they called out some things that they felt needed to be repaired so that they could insure you. And they gave you a certain amount of time to get the repairs done. But you mentioned that in moving forward, you're keeping that in mind if you're going to switch insurance companies, because you don't know what they would call out versus what this company called out. So, I mean, to some, a roof is very important, knob and tube wiring. On some, it's, gutters and exterior paint and crazy things like that.
Chimneys.
Hmm.
I I also went through the loan process just with Aaron Chapman because that was recommended, and you also told me about Aaron Chapman, and he has a great YouTube channel. He always gives updates on the market and lending. That was a great process to go through with them. And I just wanted to share that they do give advice before filing taxes. So before you file your taxes, you can give them a draft of that. They can give recommendations on to help you be able to be lendable better, bankable better. And if you did want to go outside of escrow for property taxes and insurance, it would be a one-time fee, percentage of a point you pay for the rate.
Yeah, you mentioned that before, that you like to pay your taxes. Is it taxes and insurance that you keep out?
Mhm.
You like to save up and pay for those on your own. I always go for having them escrowed into with the mortgage payment, because it's always been, I don't know, kind of a surprise. I don't save enough or don't save anything, and then the bill comes and you're scrambling to pay it. So that's one less thing I need to think about. But 0.25% is not too horrible. I think in the price range that we buy, we figured out it was around $500 as a one-time fee, so people can make a better decision that way. And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about when, we're learning all the time. Um, I didn't know that they would charge you if you wanted to pay your taxes yourself versus having them built in with the mortgage and interest payment. And I think different lenders could be different. Some could charge more, some might not charge, different things like that.
Yeah, with the other lenders I've worked with, I haven't experienced this one-time charge, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. And I haven't really done the cost to cost when I see the final, disclosure, seeing
Hmm.
all the costs listed. So
Yeah. And that's another thing that we've been lucky um, to get exposure to is like the settlement sheets and things like that from our lenders to be able to understand there aren't a lot of things you can negotiate on, right? A lot of those costs are fixed, but at least you can compare. If you can get those settlements from two different lenders, you can kind of see who's charging what for different items, and you might be able to say, hey, this guy's only charging me so much for this. Can you match it or not? Negotiate that way a little bit too.
and and in the talk, there was also, I think, the new contractor that jumped on, he was asking about all the REI Avengers courses.
Hmm.
And just wanted to break that down. We've talked so highly of that. Dion, his course is 447, but that's with a recurring, it's like a bi-monthly just course calls.
Hmm.
That's every week that lasts for the month. We've gotten so much value out of that. His one-on-one is 347. The ORAT course is 399. That is so much, it's jam-packed with information. I haven't even gone through all of that yet. That's how much information is on there. Lumberjack's course is 995. His boot camp is 995. His one-on-one is 995. And we've been through all three, and we're still waiting on Millennial Mike's course. That's coming, hopefully, because we can get so much value out of that. I just wanted to give you guys updates on the pricing for those.
Yeah, I really am enjoying Dion's, of course. We went through Matt's, and that was a lot of value. And he gave us 3 hours every Saturday of almost one-on-one time, but the groups are small. I think he was saying now he's just doing maybe 12 people per boot camp, which gives everybody a chance to ask their questions and get feedback from him. He brought in a lot of people that professionals, PMs and insurance people. His attorney was on one time, and his agent that he works with out there in Massachusetts. So a lot of value, way more than it cost us to take those. And I think one thing that isn't quite as expensive is being part of the school community, because there's a lot of, our Wednesday calls happen on that platform too now. They just opened up the out of state investor call, which is, um, I've been able to join in for short periods of time on a couple, and they're doing a great job. There's today is Sunday, but they're doing the Jared's call on the East Coast Accountability Call. There's one for agents, Mastermind for agents. There's one for the ladies of ORAT, which um, is getting good reviews. So, not that somebody was asking me the other day if it was worth joining. And like Dion and Matt always talk about, because they don't push their courses, they tell us there's so much information just on their channels that they've shared. And I think Dion is the one that says everything that's in my course is on a video on my channel. So you can get it for free. But I think where we find more value is doing those boot camps, doing the course calls every other month. He does them every week. And like you said, it's not just a one-time thing. You can continue going as long as you're as long as you want, and he does them every other month. So he also does the members only calls where we analyze deals. People bring in deals, and he'll go through them with us and analyze them. So that's been really valuable as well.
And that's $3 a month for the members.
Yeah, there's two choices. I think you can do it for $2.99 and $4.99. I'm not sure what the difference. I think he says there is no difference. So he always says buy the lower price one. So but that's just the way they are. They're just want to, help us and give as much knowledge as they can, which we appreciate.
Yeah, with the out of state meeting, Linda's investing her channel. She posted the most recent one. I think that was this Friday. And Vincent was talking about he uses Turbo Tenant to self-manage out of state, and he's really liked that program. He also uses Property Leads as a site. And I was curious what you thought where Matt was talking about using the virtual assistant. And that was actually a recommendation. So Jennifer Stewart is the virtual assistant lead generator, and Sophie Elaine, who we've liked, that recommended her. And it's like 500 a month to go through that virtual assistant. And if you've ever considered that or wanted to in the future.
Yeah, I don't know that I wouldn't consider it. Um, he says it was like 540. Was it for, I don't know why 10 hours is ringing a bell. Anyway, I don't have that much information, but I know for him and his position, it's super valuable. I don't think $500 is much for him to pay a month to get more leads coming in. He does a little bit different investing than we do, but I think it could be valuable for a lot of people out there. I don't know if there's like different tiers, like if you want to just try it out. I'm not sure if there's a lower price you could pay to try it out for a month or two, and then once you find out if it's helpful for you, then you can really dive in and pay more if you want. But for us, I think where we're at in our age, in our level of investing, we probably would just keep sticking with the way we're doing it. I think there's enough people in this community that you can get leads from if you find someone in the same area that you're investing in. I think you found quite a few more people than you thought in the beginning in Pittsburgh, and we've done the same thing in St. Louis, which is the area we're liking the most right now.
Yeah, you have your Rockstar Realtor, and yeah, you're right, because Matt, he's doing a 1031, and I guess what he was saying was the 1031, the the properties he found, I guess, fell through. So having this as another resource, and he's gotten so many leads, 80 leads from it or something. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's something good to have on the as a resource.
yeah. 1031s are a little bit tricky from what we understand about them, but the timelines and time constraints and things like that, you have to be right on it to be able to, I guess, make that whole thing qualify. Otherwise, you're
Yeah,
gonna, go out of the time window and then you end up paying taxes anyway. But um, hopefully, he'll be able to find something he can transfer all that over to.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool. I think that was about it for now, except for we're coming up on a couple weeks away from the Vegas event, so people are getting excited about that. I think the guys are planning on doing a lot of fun stuff down on Fremont Street. They said they'll be interviewing showgirls again, and I guess last year they did some, well, they weren't naked, but they interviewed male strippers. So we'll see how that goes this year.
Yeah, there was talkings on the out of state meeting that you were hosting something on Friday. Is this true?
They did.
Uh,
A good thing I missed that meeting. I don't know. I know
uh,
some people had asked about that. I think a couple of the other guys that are going were talking about getting together for dinner or something on Friday. But maybe this Wednesday we'll try to nail something down.
Either way, we'll have a bunch of fun and we'll make sure we'll let people know if there's ever any get-togethers or anything.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll look forward to seeing you this coming Wednesday, and then we'll do this again next week.
Sounds good. Excited.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.